Okay, so good evening, everyone. Good evening, Nicole. Good morning, actually, and so good to see you. Welcome all the students and educators for joining us today for this webinar on how to write the Common App essay. So, hello, I'm Devesh Lati. Oops. Yeah. So, I'm Devesh Lati, the program manager at the Next Genius Foundation. And welcome all of you. A little bit about Next Genius. Next Genius is a registered charitable trust, and we help students with scholarships for their undergraduate education in the US. All the grade 12 students or gap year students who wish to pursue their undergraduate education in the US and are looking for scholarship, the registrations for our scholarship program are now open, and I invite all of you to visit our website and register for the program. And today we have Ms. Nicole Blensley from Union College, New York, who is going to help us uh, on how to write the Common App essay. Union College is a Next Genius partner, and if you wish to, again, if you wish to apply for a scholarship at Union College, please visit our website and uh, apply for the program. So Nicole, without any further ado, I hand over the presentation to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Devesh. I'm going to attempt to share my screen then. All right, and if you can just make sure with me that this is going to present okay. Does that look okay to you, Devesh?
All right. Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great, great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for what I think is the most fun part of the application, which is the essay. I've been working in international admissions for about 15 years now, and so I have the pleasure of reading quite a few application essays. We're going to talk through a few different writing components of the application essay today, but the first thing I wanted to talk about is something new for this year that you'll find on the Common Application, which is the COVID-19 question. And I think it's important to talk just a little bit about this first to understand what this question is about, who should answer it and who shouldn't, and sort of what should you put here. So the COVID-19 question really allows students the opportunity to add additional information to their application to express ways that they might have been deeply affected by COVID-19. Now, the one thing I would encourage students to remember when we're talking about this section is that it's a global pandemic. So unfortunately, everyone has likely been touched in some capacity by COVID-19. So this question really is a space for students who their experience sort of goes beyond the experience that many of us have had, whether it's lengthy quarantine, spotty internet with less than adequate schooling access. There are things that are pretty common, I would say, throughout the globe in terms of experience. So this really is a section for students who have had maybe above and beyond the common shared experience we all can talk about and come together in for COVID-19. So I just would like students to remember that. On the flip side, this is the space for COVID-19. So the rest of your application really should be about you. All of the other writing, whether it's essays, additional information, we'll also talk about that section. Those should be other components of you. Anything that is ever related to COVID-19 should go in this section. So we don't want your whole application to read like a COVID-19 application. So please be attentive to having things in this section and then allowing yourself to sort of refocus on your personal attributes later. The other thing that I like to mention to students is that there's an additional information section. And with the additional information section, what I want students to remember is that for additional information, it's not required It's not an extension of your resume necessarily. The additional information is a space where you feel like outside of your resume, outside of your activities in your essay, there's something that's important for us to know. So additional information could be someone who's encountered a long-term illness and that impacted them during their 4-year time in high school. A substantial loss that perhaps really impacted them emotionally. But additional information, it could also mean that there might be something additional about change of schooling or a delay in schooling or something that might have been spotty in your academic record. Additional information is the place where you can include that information. If there are pieces that about your academic progression in terms of a change in the curriculum that's offered, or just for students who have gone online and weren't able to access all of their curriculum, if it's something COVID-19 that's curricular based, if at all possible, we're hoping to receive that information from a school official. So those are some things that I just want to touch on before we dive into the essay topic. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more in detail about that additional information in the COVID-19 later if we have questions. So essay writing, I said it's my favorite topic to talk about, but typically when I talk to students about the thing that they're most worried about or nervous about, it is the essay. And typically this feeling of, is something that I see on students' faces often when we talk about essay. So this is, I'm just gonna pause. So this movie, if you haven't seen it, it's called Spies in Disguise. I have 12-year-old kids, so they absolutely love Disney movies. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a fun movie, but it does, I think, give a sense of how students often feel when they think about the essay. So the first thing I want to do is to have you think about what the purpose of the essay is. And I think sometimes students sort of lack a starting point of, okay, where do I begin with the essay? Do I start with the question? Do I start with the answer? How do I begin? What's the purpose here? So one of the main purposes, or the only purpose in my mind, of the essay is really to give us a sense of who you are. So for the essay, really what I want you to focus on is the fact that we are wanting to know more about you. The essay gives us a little window into who you are. And if you are wondering what the purpose of that essay is, it really is just a chance for us to get to know you more and in more depth through your essay. So there's a couple of different ways you can go about that, but remember that it's a way to personalize your application, to tell us a little bit about your writing style, and to share some of your things listed there: ambitions, life interests, experience, personality. Okay, so there are places to start. Many people start with the common application questions. This is not my recommended place to start, I'll be honest, but I'll start with this sort of method of writing an essay first, and then maybe finish on the methods that I think are more fruitful for students. But I understand that some people really like to start with a question. And so these are, like I said, the 2021 Common Application essay questions. And what you'll see highlighted in each of these questions are meaningful, personal importance, personal growth, captivate you, your choice. These are pieces of the questions that I've popped out to remind you that when you're thinking about the question or you're approaching the essay in a way to answer a question, again, remembering that what we want to know in all of these questions is more about you, not more about a grandparent or not more about your school team, but more about you. Not more about someone else's ideology or a paper you've written, but more about you. So when you go to a question, make sure that not only you're answering the question, but also are you answering that essential piece of the puzzle, which is to tell us a little bit more about you. So we can talk through these a little bit more if students have questions, but often where I like to start is, how do you begin to talk about you? How do you write about who you are and reveal who you are? That can be a tricky thing as a high school student. Who am I? I don't know who I am. Maybe as a 17, 18-year-old, I'm still trying to figure that out and come into my own. So one approach that I really enjoy taking, and I use a couple of different sources for inspiration in the way I talk about essay writing. But this one is from, another really great animated film. And what this sort of image shows is when you're inside someone's brain, the different personality islands that are you. So personality islands are sort of islands or clusters inside your brain that sort of hold together common important things about you. So for example, here, this young woman has family island. Her family is really important to her, and there may be memories associated with her family there. There's hockey island. She plays ice hockey. That's a big part of her. Fun island and friendship island. So she's sort of, when you look at these, this is a good sort of starting point. And sometimes in terms of your essay is, what are my islands? What are the things that are most important to me that I want to make sure that I communicate in my essay? Or do I want to pick a component, an island of me, and communicate that? Whoops. So for example, here's a good way to start with that, like to figure out what your islands are, can also be listing 21 different facts, some big, some small, but just random facts about you. And through your random facts, you can figure out what your island is that you want to focus on. Or what you can do is think a little bit about, what can I use one of these or a couple of these random facts to tell more about myself in a very unique way. So I put a couple of things in here about me that are pretty unique that I don't necessarily automatically share with everyone. But I think, I do spend a lot of time at the beach. I live near the water, and but going to the beach when there's still ice on the water and, really enjoying that experience as a northerner is pretty unique. And I think that, in conjunction with talking about the close-knit family that I have, and sort of the traditions I grew up with, could really demonstrate in an essay a little bit more about myself that's definitely unique to me. And again, it's not something that's life-changing, but it is for sure something that's specific to me and really allows people to get to know a little bit more about me, maybe the way I grew up, or a little bit about the things that are important to me. The other good way to think about where can I begin with generating ideas for an essay is this concept of essay objects. So some of this comes from the essay guy. He talks about generating a list of essence objects. So things that sort of are very visceral to you, that they're just one little thing, but they really hold a great deal of meaning to you. And so I've listed a couple of my essence objects here, and they look pretty, maybe some of them a little more interesting, some a little boring, but they all have stories behind them. The first, and I happen to be with my family this weekend. My grandmother, who turns 95 today, it's her birthday, she grew up with the fine art of pickling herring or pickling fish. So it's a little bit different than maybe pickles in India, but it is the style of cuisine that I grew up with, which is a more Germanic type of cuisine, is pickling fish. And I've spent long hours with my grandmother and getting to know her and the impact she's had on me. So in some ways, this is sort of in maybe a little weird way, an essence of my grandma for today. So again, thinking about the things that are meaningful for you through essence objects can be a good way to think about how you want to lace those objects into your essay to give us a little bit of sense of who you are. So the other thing you can do is there's a few places where you can find a list of questions, right? A list of questions to generate sort of senses of yourself or ideas about yourself. And the question list that's provided here is just a smaller listing of a much lengthier project that can allow you to just answer some questions, allow you to be thoughtful and sort of reflective about who you are. Again, hopefully bringing out things that are important to you, or stories, or a particular moment that might be special, and you want to encompass that into your essay. So again, just kind of taking the time to go through and answer some of these questions, to be thoughtful about who you are and how to reflect that in an essay. The types of essays that are out there are numerous types of them that you can write. So you can tell your essay through a story, a very short story of an experience you had, a memory. You can tie together multiple components of something. So for example, if I wanted to tie together multiple components of my family, I could talk about some of my memories of growing up. So, and to sort of highlight the importance of my family, the importance of the lessons I've learned from my family. And each of those could be through maybe an essence object, a paragraph, or, you know, a core memory or an essential memory that I have, can really demonstrate through 3 different paragraphs, maybe what that specific island of who I am, I want to demonstrate for you. Or, you know, a lot of students like to use a quote. If a quote has inspired you, what we want to know is, through some of these pieces of who you are, how does that tell us more about you? And how do we build that out over the course of an essay? So a lot of students will choose the type of essay, which is we call a challenges essay. And in my mind, it's the most difficult essay to write and write effectively. The challenges essay is really, I faced a challenge, whether it's a football game, an exam, a club or organization activity, or within your community. I faced a challenge, and then I came in and I saved the day, or we won the day, and end of story. And the reason that can be very difficult is that it seems very formulaic to some extent. It's something we read often, and students, it can work really well, but it can also fail because a student has forgotten to tell us the components of them. They've only told us the components of the challenge and how they've succeeded the challenge, but they've forgotten the piece to tell us about them through the process. And so the columns that you have in front of you right now are really things to, if you're using a challenge essay, which there are lots of students who've done this really well, is to think about what the challenge is. What was the effect upon you of that challenge? So reflecting on that, what were the feelings you had? What did you have as needs, or what were the needs that arose from that experience? What did I do about it, and what have I learned from it? So again, through this process, you can make sure that, and when you're doing a challenge essay, you're not focusing on so much on the challenge and the outcome that you've forgotten the piece of telling us a bit more about you. So remember, what we want to know is, what's your story? Even though you're reading those common application prompts, they're prompts only to get a way for you to get your ideas flowing in your head. What we really want to know is a way for you to tell your story. And there is an open-ended question that really allows you to tell us your story in a way that makes most sense to you, if the other common application prompts don't fit. Some of the best ways for us to fall into an essay or a story or into writing is when students are able to, or the writer is able to, really draw us into the experience that they're having. And so this slide tells you a little bit about how to be effective in your writing to make sure that happens in your essay. So you're drawing us into your experience, or a little bit of who you are. And this is a little bit more technical of a slide, but make sure that you're being very specific about your nouns and the power of your verbs that you're using. So the way that I think of all of these slides is the very last one. Engage all of your senses in your writing if possible. What are we seeing? What are we hearing? What are we touching, smelling, tasting, thinking, feeling? Like just try and engage our senses as a reader in your essay to tell us a little bit more about what we're experiencing, to explain to us a little bit more about the details of what's happening in that moment. That can happen, again, through that description of senses, but also using some really great adjectives and adverbs. So tips, I've given you some ideas on how to generate ideas about your essay. Honestly, some of the workshops for essay writing could take days because it really is a personal process of unloading and discovering who you are a little bit, and then sort of reorganizing that into a very concise story. Because remember, the essay has word limits. So what you need to do is make sure that you focus so tightly on a particular memory or a core memory or core object that you're so tightly focused on that one experience that we're able to fully learn a little something about you through that. Students often will try and cover a very large topic or cover a broad idea, and it leaves everything feeling very vague and doesn't allow us a chance to get to know them. So again, if you stay close to a topic, a very specific memory, experience, object, belief, and do that through a very specific experience or memory that you can build out all of those senses to us to explain it, I think that allows us to get to know you in what is a very short essay in the end to learn about you. So making sure your topic is very focused. Don't repeat what's found elsewhere in the application. So, if you've talked about something in your additional information session, or there's something that's in your activity section, that's really well displayed, or you've written obviously something in COVID-19, we should not find any of that in your essay. If there's, of course, an activity that's important to you and you're going to tell me about a memory or a piece of that or something that's been a profound experience for you, or just a little experience to you, you're a runner and you want to demonstrate that your running is important to you. One of my favorite essays was really from a woman who she described her body and her experience of a long run she went on. And so her writing in style was sort of longer sentences and a little bit slower in the beginning. And she talked about the things she saw and she was thinking about and what her body was doing. And then a little faster sentences and a little bit, shorter and kind of to the point of how she was feeling and what she was witnessing. She just took me on one long run she went on and what she experienced. And so again, she did repeat an activity from her listing of activities, but it was very focused on an experience that allowed me to get to know more about her, what she was thinking about. It clearly communicated the depth of her interest in running, but it was a very focused topic that allowed me to kind of get to know a bit more about how she was thinking, what she was feeling. Be sure to show the outcome. So for some students, if they're talking about, I worked with another student who was, she's a Nordic racer, skiing, downhill skiing. And she was talking about, sort of her anxiety around a race and all of the challenge she faced in terms of accomplishing her level of skill to this point. And, and then in the end, the race was over and she gave me some technical information, but she didn't tell me the outcome for her personally. Where did she end at that point? What was that experience for her in terms of overcoming all of that anxiety that she had dealt with and the challenges? Where did she end? So she had forgotten her personal outcome. She told me the outcome of the race, but she didn't really give me her ending personal outcome. The other thing I would say is if you are choosing a question that asks for a particular prompt, or you're applying to a college that asks you to speak to a particular question, make sure you've answered that question or addressed that prompt in the essay. being authentic, we've talked about a lot of ways here to get to your authentic self, in terms of opportunities and methods to reflect on who you are. And again, they can be very small things. I love the idea of the essence objects to get to some things that feel important to you and are authentic to you because of the meaning they have behind them and your ability to communicate that. The next one, I cannot emphasize enough. Don't try to do too much in the essay. Just really be focused and don't try to accomplish too many topics. We're not asking you to build out your resume in your essay, and you should not do that. It doesn't allow us to really get to know anything about you in a much more in-depth way. It's just a rewriting of your resume, rather than a sense or a little window into who you are. So I just say be very careful with that. With the last topic, I'm focusing on proofreading. Obviously, it's spelt differently each way. Please remember to proofread, proofread, proofread. And I think, when it comes to this, one of the things I want you to do is take the time to read aloud, because one of the best ways to catch if an essay is not sounding authentic to you is to read it aloud and hear yourself saying those words. So sometimes students will get a little heavy-handed with the thesaurus, and they'll use words in their essays that when they read them aloud, it's very clear that that's not a word they would use in their everyday language. And so I want you to be attentive that the essay sounds like you. It uses words. We're not asking everyone, we're not checking your depth of vocabulary or checking to make sure you really exhausted the thesaurus. If we have to look it up, it's definitely causing a pause in the essay and not allowing us to kind of get into the moment of knowing more about you. So make sure that the words in your essay really are things that sound like you, and when you say them, they sound like you. The other thing I would say about that is when you read aloud, you really have a sense to say, yeah, that sounds like my voice. That sounds like my story. And it allows you to kind of think about, have I listened too much to other people's feedback about what I should cover in my essay or how I should say something? I think that ability to hear yourself talking and say, yeah, that sounds like me. That sounds like how I would express myself. And then also it's the best way to catch any typos. So that proofreading part, oftentimes if you've said something in a way or left a word out or said a word you wouldn't, that doesn't fit grammatically, when you read it aloud, even if no one's in the room, it allows you to sort of catch some of those common spelling or grammar mistakes. So I don't have a clock